Good morning, everyone, and buenos dias. My name is Jenna Trabulis from Next League, and we're here today to talk about what's next. Access to women's football, the deals that are in place to showcase the future of the sport. For many people, this summer has demonstrated that women's sports, and especially women, are having a moment. But for others, it's a series of moments that have galvanized into a movement that is gathering velocity and momentum in access, in media coverage, and social impact, and especially in investment. There's been a lot of data shared in the last few days, and we won't repeat it all here. But we know that this Women's World Cup has broken records in attendance and viewership and driven investment from $200 million in Australia to $1 billion committed by FIFA over the next 4 years. We've heard from Julie Ehrman, founder of Angel City, about the most valuable NWSL team, and Mercury 13 and Monarch Collective are investing over $100 million in changing investing, in their vision, and how to engage and attract the female fan. But beyond that, it has been about women. Beyoncé and Taylor Swift have lifted the economies in their tour. They're driving billions in value, and Barbie has become the highest grossing film in history. And now, in partnership with Voice in Sport, Barbie is introducing women in sports as 2023 Career of the Year. These are big watershed moments, and part of this movement is about access. But we're talking about the access that starts at the grassroots level, at the youth level, and cultivating that passion and driving exposure both in media and on the pitch. So I want to introduce you to my panel and let them tell you a little bit about their moment of passion, the thing that got them excited about sport and inspired them to work. Tammy, what got you into the world of sport?
Well, I was doing sport from a young age, like I'm sure a lot of people in the room are the same. I was into one of the martial arts. I started when I was 13, continue to do it sort of 40 years in. It was a place that I felt safe, as a place that I felt that I could express myself. And I had a dream from age 15 that I wanted to be a Hapkido master and have my own school. I achieved that. I still have a school in central London. And I suppose what I found that feeling of being able to be myself was very much in a bubble. And outside of that bubble of my own school, I didn't feel almost valued or like it was a proper thing for a woman to do. Then bang, London 2012 comes along, and it totally blew me away. It was sort of the first time that I'd actually seen women's sport. It was the first time that I was seeing female athletes on the front page, and it changed me inside, and I thought, I can't lose this. The Olympics are ending. Right. And that realization that things needed to change, and that's when the organization Women's Sport Trust became about.
Incredible. And Peter, you're in the world of streaming and bringing access for content for women's sports. Yep. But did you want to get into the sporting world as well?
Yeah, I mean, kind of similar to Tammy, although it sounds like Tammy was more successful than I was in sport. But, you know, I played most sports, lots of rugby, lots of football, did lots of rowing. Love the idea, like most kids, of being a Premier League footballer or rugby player. Realised that was never going to happen in a million years, and next best thing was to move into sport. So pretty much straight from uni, went into a kind of small sports organisation and have been in sport ever since. And, you know, having that background passion where you have all of these amazing clients that you're generally passionate about anyway, and the kind of services they provide has just given me more motivation through my career, I'd say. Amazing.
And Christina, you're at YouTube running sports, music, news, everything in Spain and Portugal. Did you want to? What was your passion moment into getting into sport?
My passion is music and sports. And I'm in sport because I write music. I used to write music. I wrote a folk song a long time ago. And I went to the label record and I said, do you like it? I say, hey, no way. I went to Pop Idol and Operación Triunfo here in Spain back in 2005. And I didn't choose the right song. How many Spanish people are here? Raise your hand.
I see a few.
Rocío Dúrcal, me gustas mucho. Imagine, it's like a ranchera. And I say, okay, thank you, give up. So what I did is I create a YouTube channel and say, oh, this is my time. So I create my YouTube channel with, I upload all my songs. And of course, aside of this, I do love sports. I've been playing sport for a long time. I used to play basketball, even though I'm very medium, small size. But my passion also about, I mean, in YouTube, it's true that I manage sports partners, news, media, and health and podcasts now. So I've got like I did various verticals, but sports, I think, is question of passion. And in YouTube, sports and music are huge because of the emotional. They are emotional and they drive passion from the fans. That's why it's getting bigger in the platform.
So captivating that passion and turning that into access. You know, Tammy, you've looked about how we take people through that path to become a committed fan. Does it start at our youth? Is that where it starts?
Gosh, I don't know. The whole concept of fandom I find absolutely fascinating. I mean, what gets people attention, what makes people feel belonging. And our role, the Women's Sport Trust, is really to kind of steer the industry and get them to start thinking differently and focusing in particular areas. And fandom is sort of quite a new topic within women's sport. For quite some time, it was very binary. You're either a fan of women's sport or you're not. And then on one of our, because we do regular visibility reporting, and on one of our webinars, we brought the BBC in to share some of their research, their new research. And they'd looked at fandom as in you are a fan, you're not a fan, or you're not yet a fan. And this was revolutionary to everybody who was listening. And I look back before this panel on when that actually happened. That was June of last year. So this interest into fandom is really quite recent. And since that time, we've been doing a variety of things. We brought together 5 rights holders. We looked into we called it turning moments into habit. That was really what came out of that was the importance of excitement in women's sport, which is kind of obvious, but nobody was talking about it. Then looking at how major events broadcast on TV are a way to ignite fandom, the importance of attendance as far as being the bedrock of habit, and then also that domestic experience is how it sort of cements it in. And what that started to do was to get the industry to think about their bit in the puzzle. So instead of just building their bit, if we're building fandom from a low point, every little bit of the industry has a different role to play, and we have to work together to sort of to actually get to where we want to be. And then recently we had a partnership with the RNA, did some research with Gemba, that looked into the committed fan of women's sport and demonstrated how underserved they are, and also you know, as far as monetization, they're a really valuable group, and you know they're really underserved. They want to see things like player skills, personalities, but the rivalries, all this sort of stuff. So it's yeah, we're definitely on a journey, and I suppose one of the challenges is how do we move people through those buckets? We're very, you know, I've been to a number of panels here already, and when we're talking about men's football, we're often talking about servicing a fan. So it's a different skill that we have to learn as far as, I haven't heard anyone talk about growing fandom, and it could be the panels that I've gone to, I don't know. But it's an area that is faster, gaining momentum, and fascinating to learn.
Yeah. So, Christina, some people would say that they would rather give up clothing or food than YouTube. So it's like you are the megaphone for a lot of the young people. Like, that is the thing that they love the most. Thinking about what Tammy said, how is YouTube kind of fostering that fandom? How are people finding that content?
Yeah. In YouTube, you know that it's a huge platform. It's a global platform where the creator or the properties, sports properties, are uploading the content. So YouTube provide the tools to get or to engage with the fans. So it's a way, I think, our mission and the YouTube mission is to build audiences to foster the fan engagement and also drive revenue. The foster fan engagement is super important. I mean, a lot of people, where you saying before about the algorithm and how it works on YouTube, and it's like a mystery how it works on YouTube, the algorithm. Every person that goes to YouTube is unique to the algorithm, and it follows what you search for. So if you're searching for music, it will provide you more music or related content regarding music. If you're searching for sports, women's sports, it will show you more sports. So the more you search, the better get to know you, and the better provide you the content that you really like. At some point, you don't need to search for your content. You just receive the content when you go to YouTube that you want to really watch. We've seen the traffic sources in YouTube that before it was the search, the first one, and now, a few years later, we found out that browse features is like just when the people arrive to YouTube, it gets the right click. I mean, it's just one click, and you go straight away to see what you really want to watch. So we are innovating in tools to get a better knowledge of the user for us to provide the better content or content that they really love and they really enjoy. So they will create a huge fandom about this.
So Christina's building like that megaphone, and Peter, at Endeavor Streaming, you're working with some of the biggest names in sports. Outside of football, in women's sports, you have NWSL and WNBA running on your platform, as well as some of the biggest names in UEFA and other Champions League teams.
Yep.
Once you have that committed fan, how are they gravitating towards that platform, and what kind of growth have you seen?
So I think they're varying success in that kind of journey, but I think when it comes to football clubs, like we run services for Real Madrid and Spurs and a few others, it's about, as it's been talked about a lot at this conference and others, it's about the game day experience, but also the non-game day experience. So how do you drive relevancy through the week, where generally fans are time poor, so they're not just considering how much sports content they should watch, working out what they want to watch on Netflix or whatever it may be. So you've got to be very precise in how you drive that kind of entire week-long engagement. And I think what football clubs especially are seeing is that they're best placed to provide fantastic access post-game through the early stages of the week, where you can really start to, as a super fan, consume what's happening on a Monday, right? So on a Monday, if you're taking a lunch break and you know that you can tune into one of these club services and there's going to be a quick snippet from the training ground, and the coach will just give a bit of insight into what's happening with injuries, etc., and then you're seeding other content through to the weekend around, behind-the-scenes access, original content, getting to understand the players, their regimes, etc., all the way through to game day. That's the kind of content mix you absolutely need to have. Slightly different approach from the kind of federation league level in how you drive that experience, but also lots of similarities, right? It's just about relevancy and trying to find these ways of having the appointment to view experience, but also allowing them to kind of discover content through personalization. And really, if you look at OTT and probably preaching to converted, that's one of the biggest benefits of OTT, right? Is it allows you to have a much more interactive experience where, to Christina's point, you can really search and go down those rabbit holes and consuming more and more content.
So much of what we talked about in our conversations is like, if we build it, they will come, and making that content available. And DAZN worked in the last year to get the UEFA finals and all of that content available on YouTube for free. Can you talk a little bit about that partnership and how that visibility has changed by making that content available?
Yeah. To give you a context, we closed a deal, so we signed a deal with DAZN. We partnered with DAZN to live stream all games from Women UEFA Champions League in the DAZN YouTube channel. And the results of the last year were outstanding, to be honest. It was 61 games live streamed on the YouTube channel, DAZN YouTube channel, 64 million views in DAZN OTTs plus YouTube channel. We got also like more than 12 million unique viewers. The final got 4 million live views, which is 56% higher increase than the year before. And which is really interesting for the women's sports is like the Google search word for the Women UEFA Champions League increased by 6 times. So
wow.
this is creating like we're building the audience, and we're building also the fandom, no? People are searching for the Women UEFA Champions League. And we were super happy with these results. Changed this year. I don't know, we're gonna talk, you're gonna ask me later.
Oh, I can ask you now. I mean,
Can I say that?
it's going to shift next year because it's subscription.
Yeah, it's shifting. They're going to be like for this season, it's going to be a few live streaming on YouTube, but then the rest of the games are going to live stream on the DAZN OTT. But this is normal. YouTube always is helping or supporting the OTTs or the broadcasters to drive users to the platform. So now it's time to check or to see if this is working. Yeah. And we're playing with this.
Yeah, I mean, women control 85% of the wallet. I mean, the data is different around the world, but that's pretty much the basic stat. And then we know that female fandom is different, but and it includes men as well. And Peter, you talk about your family and how do you get your sons are female football fans, but your daughter is still kind of on the fence.
Yeah, I think.
Like, how are we getting people to pay? Like, if we shift this, are we changing access?
Yeah.
Are we not exposing everyone to the amazing content, both on and off the pitch?
Yeah, I mean, I think just to touch on the experience kind of from a family point of view, I think, again, there's an error to maybe over-index on female fans for women's sports, in that with the World Cup that's just gone recently, I've tried very hard to get my daughter to really engage in the Women's World Cup. Hasn't really understood it, whereas my 2 boys who have played lots of football previously absolutely love the Women's World Cup. Didn't really see any kind of gender differences between what they watch at the Premier League at the same time to then flipping to the Women's World Cup. So I think that's really important to understand that there are opportunities across the spectrum. And then I think with women's football, similar to other developing sports leagues, when it comes to how you drive fan engagement and adoption, I agree that broadly, if there's a pretty detailed investment case that you need to build against what you want to do, but definitely the advice we're generally giving, not just in women's sport, but for other developing league formats, is to try and get out to market with a free service behind a registration, start to kind of gather that customer data, educate them on what the proposition is, the values, the entertainment portfolio, and then over time you can get more creative in the assets that you're building. And once you can really see that you've got an addressable direct-to-consumer audience, you can then look to introduce kind of freemium, premium initiatives as part of that, but do it against a very clear investment case. And that's what we spend a lot of time doing now as well, is not just the product execution, but the upfront strategy work, so that working with an NWSL or with a EuroLeague basketball or whoever it may be, to say, well, look, if we go into this particular market, what do you think the proposition should be? What do you think the underlying commercial strategy should be? And taking all of that into account and competing services, we can see that you have a trend over 5 years of potentially getting to, X thousand subscribers, and that modelling is so important, especially when, with a lot of these conversations, it's not a direct and immediate path to profitability. It's more about building for the future.
Right. What's the role of brands and corporates in this path? I mean, Tammy, you've looked a lot into this. Christina, you're looking at the comparison between the Men's World Cup and the Women's World Cup. How are they help accelerating this access?
I think we've firstly got to understand that ultimately brands want to sell their products. So I think a lot of time as sort of rights holders, we've sort of, or even as spectators of fans ourselves, we've expected loads of, we almost want a magic bullet out there. So it's finding that the right partnership that's going to accelerate things. It's interesting to see how things develop. We looked at our recent data, looked at who was advertising during the Women's World Cup on ITV, because previously those big tournaments had been on BBC, hence no adverts. So it was interesting for us to delve into that a little bit, and we found a lot of the highest category advertising was for those personal care and cosmetic brands, which is different to what usually sort of advertises during that time slot. We also did some research that looked at the commercial landscape of women's sport. Just really, again, our role is to try and give the industry confidence. And it came back that the awareness of brands supporting women's sport can be equivalent to men's properties, and that in many ways it can drive higher levels of affinity and consideration. I think a lot of times there's been this real fear as well, or a few years ago, that somehow if we promote women's sport, it will take away from men's sport. And actually what we're seeing is other brands coming into the market. But they do have a role in actually building that value as well, sort of activating beyond the specific tournament, putting spend into media spend and so forth, being willing to invest in reach to again build this whole process.
I was just going to add to that. I think, excuse me, what's even more important in women's sport from a kind of sponsorship and advertising point of view is I think there's even more focus from fans on how genuine those types actually are. In that, there is, like we're talking today, a fantastic kind of movement across women's sport in general. I think advertisers and sponsors need to probably work even harder to show that they're not just jumping on the bandwagon and actually are investing in and wanting to kind of grow participation and visibility, etc. So I actually think it's even more acute that you really show that you're genuine in what you're kind of partnering on.
Yeah, I mean, authenticity and being genuine is like thrown around a lot as a buzzword. Who's doing it well? Like, we see those ads, and maybe we see a shift in spend, but like, are we seeing the impact? Like, are brands coming through on their promise or their commitment?
We've seen in YouTube, we've seen that a lot of, some at least creators, YouTube creators are key for YouTube content creators. And we've seen that some athletes, like, I don't know if you know Travis Hunter from Colorado, NFL football Colorado, from the University of Colorado, he created a YouTube channel with talking about anything that he likes, and also to put some of the on the field images, and he got branded content. So this is another way where athletes can deal with sponsors or brand or advertisers to create branded content within their content. So for me, everything starts from awareness, building your audience, and then the advertiser or the sponsor will come. It's true that the advertiser and the sponsor will go to the properties, broadcaster, the big properties, sports properties, but it's true that an athlete needs to build their own brand as well. And I know that they need to focus on their sports, but some of them are doing or building their branding around this, and YouTube is a good place for this, and also other platforms or media, social media platforms from build the brands, and a sponsor will go for them, and they pay a lot of creators. They're getting out of YouTube, inside of YouTube with the YouTube content, but out of YouTube, I don't mean by advertising, but just pay branded content from different sponsors. So it's another way to get money or to invest on athletes or in sports in women. But it's true that we are quite far away from men in terms of this. We need to work.
Yes. I mean, last year, the awful stats are that it's 4% of sponsorship dollars, and we're seeing incremental changes, but we still have a long way to go.
Yeah.
And I think, Picasso always said that good artists borrow, great artists steal. Like, is there things from men's sports that women's sports should be borrowing and stealing? Or where do we create our own canvas? Because we're getting new advertisers in and getting new brands. There's different things that women are doing. What should women be doing? Is raising that comparison with men's even a relevant discussion?
Well, I think the two parts I'll probably touch on there. Firstly, I think with women's sports properties, they shouldn't necessarily just try and replicate the men's format. I actually lean much more towards you've got to find differentiation. I think Baroness Sue Campbell, she spoke at something last year, who's the director of the English Football Association, and she talked very kind of passionately about, you know, the EPL, English Premier League, massive, massive success, global phenomenon, etc. WSL growing at a fantastic rate as well, but really looking to create a separate proposition, a separate identity. So, and I think that's the case, not just, there's that example generally across the board. So I think differentiation and really understanding how you want to stand out is super important. And then I think learnings from the men's game to the women's game, I would say it kind of goes to grassroots insofar as I think the men's game has obviously had many, many problems over a long, decades where, kids have tried incredibly hard to get all the way to the top. They've invested themselves, their family have invested themselves from the age of, 5, 6, 7, and then they don't make it and the support programs are not particularly good. And definitely there's been a lack of education delivered. All the clubs have got so much better at that, but that's a great example of where women's football should be able to have a much, much better structure for how you can kind of develop girls all the way through to either making it professionally or just missing out, but then still having kind of other opportunities. And then I suppose the flip side of that is you would hope that as more money comes into the women's game, that greater investment allows for greater professionalism because all the athletes can focus even more of their time, etc., which will raise the standard of the game even further.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think we're seeing that shift where the athletes are becoming influencers and brands, and women's footballers in particular have had to kind of own their own story and create their own path, and really building kind of an inclusive fandom. What is if fans are now following individual players, what is the future of like the women's footballer as kind of who's the next big star? How do we start to cultivate those names that become the Messis of the world and the Mbappes and the Beckhams? Who are those? What's that next generation look like? And how do we bring not just the 5 at the top, the tip of the spear?
It's a lot of pressure, isn't it, to put on an athlete, because fans are engaging with those individual athletes. It's it's kind of the woman athlete has to do everything, don't they? They have to, and also talk about societal issues and I suppose I don't know who the next ones are going to be, but I hope that we're building support around them, because there's a lot of risk with being in that position and a lot of pressure as well.
Yeah, I would just, I'd add to that, it's a similar, I think it's the most complex part of sport now, in men's and women's game, is that hierarchy from federation to league to club to the underlying talent, and they all rightly want to have their own place in that, and exactly how you have those handoffs is very, very complex. I think the other, hopefully, advantage that women's football have, or women's sport, is that it's obviously probably doesn't have the same legacy and complexity that the men's game has. If you look at all of the, especially in my space, all of the technology that's deployed across a lot of men's sports, how the data is shared between clubs and fans and YouTube back in, and then the federations. There are lots of systems there that have been built up over 10, 15 years because women's football is in an earlier stage. You would hope that actually there'll be more simplicity in how you can manage customer data, and to your point around the fan, the individual, you hopefully then have a scenario where there's a lot more understanding of fan data, both from a club level and from the athlete level, to provide really targeted services.
Yeah. Victoire from Mercury 13 called it a second mover advantage.
Yeah.
Love that.
Exactly.
And I think part of that is that we can create the systems based on where we are now and where we're going to go in the future, rather than just building off of that legacy.
Exactly right. Yeah.
So Tammy, you mentioned a little bit about like that pressure of talking about societal issues, but that is really part of what I think the call it the athlete of the future is really that brand.
It's what drives us. I mean, I'm a sportswoman, and
Yeah.
it drove me to set up an organization. You know,
Right.
it's very integral, I think, to who we are as women at the moment. There's an athletes, we also run elite athlete programs, and they feel they want to give back, they want to do more. I suppose as it gets, something the fans love is that easy access to players. You know, they're signing autographs and things afterwards. As it gets bigger, can we still sustain that? Or how are we going to keep that same sort of level of
intimacy?
Yeah, that's the word, intimacy. It'll be interesting.
I don't know. What do you guys think?
I mean, I generally agree. I think that's what it's all about. It's about the storytelling and how you can do that in a kind of protected way, so that these athletes can develop in the right way.
Right. I mean, I think that's an interesting question about like the combination between storytelling and gameplay, understanding the players as humans, but also honoring and respecting their gameplay. Like Bonmati from Spain and FC Barcelona is one of the most efficient players in the world. Like, what story are we starting to tell about her? You know, right now it's part of a kind of a equity and equality discussion, and she's winning awards off the field and on the field. But you know, what part of that storytelling should be in the forefront? Should it be the gameplay or should it be the impact?
I mean, I think it has to be both.
Yeah.
Absolutely has to be both, because you have storytelling of what happens in the game, but there's so much around it now with the level of coverage that that's the opportunity, I think, to really connect. And if these athletes want to really kind of have greater control of how they engage with fans, and also, let's be honest, how they monetize a very limited shelf life, which all sports people have, you've got to open up and give them insight and access, because that's what drives the kind of the passion kind of engagement and the super fan driven engagement, as opposed to just someone who kind of likes it, checks in and watches a half, but then pops out, etc. You've got to give access for sure.
That emotional connection.
Yeah.
I agree. In YouTube also works like this. I mean, you search for any player, women player, and you will see, like, in different channels, like a little things of her. So if people are searching for this person, of this player, why not she could create her own channel with all different ways of content storytellings or emotional, I mean, when you get to the people, you get through emotional moments. So this is the way you impact people and you engage with the fans. That's why creators, again, are good at YouTube, because they engage, they talk directly to their fans. And years ago, it was impossible to talk to an artist or to talk to a player. And nowadays, you find another different ways to engage with them. So we are far away. I mean, the women's sports is far away from this, I understand, but we're building the system, and we have the commitment, the sport properties, YouTube, and all the platforms to support these girls to be successful. I think so.
So we've talked a lot about kind of the evolution that's happened in the last year, and that's been building off of many years of moments. What's next? If you had a prediction for what's going to happen, if we're sitting here next year at the same time, what's the next big thing in women's sports?
Say again? What's the next big thing?
In women's sports.
It's a good question. I mean, I think it'll be a continual evolution rather than revolution. I think the big step change will always be based around World Cup, Euros, etc. I think specifically in the US with NWSL, which is one of our clients, I think they're about to continue to go on a monumental growth curve. They're breaking attendance records. Streaming numbers are off the charts. They've
got a new rights deal coming.
New rights deals, new teams. 2 new teams next season. And so they're just going to go from strength to strength as well.
Yeah.
Christina,
I agree.
next year.
Yeah. World Cup this year changed completely the perception of women's sports. And I think this is going to keep changing, and it's going to be evolving through the years. And we're here, as I said before, to support them.
Fantastic.
We have a commitment.
Tammy, close us out. Prediction for next.
Gosh, God knows what life will look like in a year's time, but what I'm watching, private investment like Mercury 13, evolution of fandom, the role of the athlete, and also the WSL rights, and how much they go for and how that's packaged, I think will be really interesting.
What do you think?
God, we're out of time.
We're out of time. So we'll find out next year. No, we'll
Yes.
find out in future. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.